Here, Bernice.
Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Today I'm so excited to have Mr. Stephen Jaffe back again. He is running in California, District 12. And I'll remind you guys this again, but California votes on Tuesday among 7 other states. So thank you so much for joining me again today, Stephen.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's an exciting time.
It is. It is. I'm so excited for everything on Tuesday. As you guys can see, I have a Jaffe button out of about 80 candidates. Stephen is only one of 6 who I've personally endorsed. I want to state RP does not endorse anyone, but this is me personally. I do endorse him and Gail McLaughlin from California. So it's pretty awesome to have you here again. So you've also been endorsed by some pretty awesome people and organizations. Susan Sarandon, pretty big deal. San Francisco Bernie Kratz, Veterans for Bernie, which is a really big deal. They're an amazing organization. We only have 30 minutes, you guys. So, because Stephen's, of course, crazy busy right now. So I want to jump right in and get to your platform. You guys, he is running against Pelosi, who is, basically, Stephen Jaffe and Tim Canova are kind of the 2 most important races. If we can get rid of those 2, we are golden. And I also want to stress the importance that California is different than every other state. They actually have the top 2 people go on to compete against each other. So in theory, you could have 2 Dems. So the thought of Stephen going against Pelosi is kind of amazing. So I would love to see that. But anyway, I digress. The most important thing on your platform, the most important thing on anyone's platform is you are corporate money free. So can you talk about, why you chose to go that route and why it's important for you?
Well, first of all, I used Bernie's campaign as a model. Accomplished what he did accomplish without corporate contributions. So, I mean, that's one reason, because I was inspired by Bernie to make this run. The second reason is I think it's very difficult to maintain your integrity and your credibility when you are taking money from organizations whose values are different from your own. It's very tempting to, I'll call it exactly what it is: sell your vote. Sell your vote to, in the case of healthcare, for-profit insurance companies, big pharma, for-profit healthcare providers. When you take all that money, institution thing in return. In the case of my opponent, they get it. They get opposition to single payer. So I chose corporate money in my campaign.
Absolutely.
My vote is not, I guess I should add, my vote is not for sale.
I'm sorry?
My vote is not for sale.
Awesome.
Yes.
The interesting thing is Pelosi seems to be even more so than usual kind of skirting questions. She was asked about the Kaepernick and things like that, and she said, all I'll say is I love our national anthem, and that was her answer. With you at least we would get transparency and we would get a progressive support as well. You do talk about welcoming and protecting immigrants as well. And I know California does have a lot of immigrants. What is it like in your district as far as ICE and, things like that?
Well, You're right. California is kind of and Texas probably are probably the epicenter. Probably, the southern border of the U.S. Is the epicenter, and certainly California is right there with it for immigration issues. Here in San Francisco, a lot of government offices, and there's lots of protests, about that. ICE has a presence here, and it was raised and escalated about a year ago. There was an unfortunate killing of a woman named Kate Steinle, actually shot by accident. She was killed by an immigrant who had been protected by San Francisco sanctuary law. He got out. He's from a park ranger's car, which it had no business being in there. And it went off accidentally, hit the sidewalk, ricocheted, and killed this poor, unfortunate woman. San Francisco, at least the right wing, went nuts, saying this is the murderous immigrants. The Trump mindset. And the district attorney way overcharged the guy which of course to prove. He should have been charged at the most with involuntary manslaughter. It was an accident. The gun went off the side. So acquitted was acquitted of the first-degree murder, and the outrage just, of course, got worse because he essentially walked. He was, of course, deported. The immigration issue is very much on the minds of everybody here. That incident really brought it, and the sanctuary city brought it to the forefront of the attention here in San Francisco. I support a pathway to citizenship. I support DACA, and I am recently even more outraged by these stories about families being torn apart at the border and 1,500 lost children. How do you lose children? How do you separate children from their families and lose them? So that needs to be looked into. And if I get into Congress, which I intend to do, I will certainly get behind the investigation of what the hell that is all about.
Well, and you are a lawyer as well, so you have experience looking into the legality of, anything like this that transpires.
Yes. Well, I like to think I know the right questions to ask. That's correct.
Absolutely. Right. You also have single payer on your platform, of course. Can you just kind of give people an idea of why that's on your platform? Why is that important to you?
Well, it's on my platform in at least two different levels. And I think this is familiar to anybody who supports single payer. One is it's more efficient to do it that way. It will save money. And we're the only industrialized nation really in the world which does not provide health care for all of its residents. There is no reason whatsoever not to do that here in the United States, except for the profit motive, which is stopping it. On a deeper level, which I feel even more strongly about, it's a moral issue. I don't think the economics of the issue should matter as much as the morality of the issue. Everyone has a right, a human right to health care, and we need to do whatever is necessary to fulfill that right. It's obscene. It's obscene that the system that we have now. I'll make it very personal. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually in the hospital overnight. I wasn't sick or anything. I'd had a procedure, and I went in for some pain management. So next in the bed next to me is this guy. He was in his 50s. He was dying of cancer. He's dying stage 4 cancer, and he's not going to survive 6 months. Well, the reason he's dying is because he used to the world's largest HMO, which I will not mention except it starts with a K. And when he went there, it started as a thyroid problem. They told him he had asthma. Then they told him he had bronchitis. But they refused to do the CT scan that he needed. which would have found the cancer early enough to save his life. So now it has spread to his liver, and he's not going to survive. And the reason they didn't do it or didn't want to do it was money, because this HMO is at the same time a healthcare provider and a healthcare insurance company. And insurance companies want to save money. So this HMO saved money, didn't give him the CT scan, and now he's going to die. And he's a pretty high up official in a metropolitan agency here. This is not somebody, that's marginalized here in the community. Had we had single payer, this guy would be able to live, because they've done the CT scan, which was necessary. Nobody would worry about what it's going to cost. That's the best illustration of why it's a moral issue for me.
Absolutely. And along with that, do you also support something going with that to lower prices on from Big Pharma?
Oh, that is part of the single payer package. When there's only one person paying for the drugs, the bargaining power of that single payer tremendously increases. And if the pharmaceuticals won't sell the drug to the single payer, there may be other places and other options the single payer may have. So they will bargain the same way Medicare now bargains for the cost of meds.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You also talk about the school to prison pipeline. I know it seems like everyone I interview from California, that is something that's very prominent. Can you discuss why that's on your platform?
Well, because there is a grossly disproportionate number of African Americans and people of color in jail compared to the other portions of the population. And that's wrong. And that has to be fixed. And the way I would start going about that, which I think is a key to fixing the school to prison pipeline, is bail reform. Bail reform. The bail is at the threshold before anybody is even convicted. But if they don't have the money to get bailed out, they wait in jail, not prison, but county jail, sometimes for a year or more for a trial. That's the start of the pathway that we're talking about. And if we can remove that start by releasing nonviolent for drug offenders and nonviolent offenders and some others who qualify for non-bail release, I think that would go a long way towards stopping the pipeline that we're discussing. So I'm in favor of bail reform.
And what about legalizing cannabis and going back and taking away, retroactively, taking away those sentences for anything related to cannabis?
Yeah, well, cannabis is now legal in California, but there are former convictions. I would certainly consider supporting a proposal which would expunge convictions for possessions of cannabis under circumstances which would now be legal. So
Awesome.
that's yeah.
And that would be so many people that would let out of jail. And as you stated, predominantly people of color. You also, on that note, you stated that you want to investigate police shootings. You're not, like pretty much all of us, you're not pleased with the way things are being handled when these police shootings are happening. So can you expand on that a little?
Well, yeah, I recently, a few days ago, attended a protest. There's a young man named Mario Woods who was pretty well known, who was gunned down by the police. He was unarmed, and it was a circular firing squad, if you would, and decided a few days ago he is not going to prosecute anyone. And the reason he gave was, we asked the policemen what was going on, the shooters, And they all said, we feared for our life. And the DA stopped there. Stop there. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. There are a lot of charges which could have been brought against the policeman who shot Mario Woods, which the DA did not bring. And I'm going to put on my lawyer hat here for a second. There's a lot of charges below murder. There's such a thing called negligent homicide. Negligent homicide is used in very bad auto accidents where people are killed. No one intended to kill anybody, but when someone dies and somebody negligently operates their car, that is called vehicular manslaughter. These cops could have been charged with manslaughter. There should have been a jury to determine whether the officer's statements that they were in fear for their life from somebody standing 20 feet away holding a knife, a jury should determine whether that fear is reasonable to enable them to use lethal force against that person. That's a jury question, not a DA question. So I don't mean to go off on this, but
no, absolutely. Yes, that's a really, really good point.
Yes.
And Mark brought up one of my next questions, Mark Collins. He wants to know if you support a federal jobs guarantee.
I haven't talked about this in a while, but it's interesting you brought that up. I'm a big fan of Franklin Roosevelt because of everything that he did and his values. Roosevelt had something called the WPA, the Work Progress, so I forget what it was called, but it was what you're describing now. It was rural employment. That's what he put in place when the Depression hit, to get everybody who was out of work building things. That's why we have all these federal buildings and Hoover Dam and all these other that were built in the 30s by the WPA. I am in favor of creating a similar program in 2019, starting when I get into Congress. And people who are out of work or can't get jobs would be able to go to work there. And I have it tied to a completely seemingly unrelated issue, but it really isn't, which is the student loan crisis. I think anybody who goes to work for this new agency that I'm proposing should get paid twice. They should get their regular pay for working for the agency, but for every dollar they earn, I think a dollar should come off their student loan. So that will reduce that at the same time. So they can serve their country, they can get a job, they can do something productive, and they can reduce any student loans that the person might have.
That's a really interesting concept. I like that a lot. That's awesome. Yes. You also talk about fair elections, and I know you're up against Pelosi. I know you've dealt with some shit the past few months. Can you just talk about some of the barriers that they've been, that you've been dealing with?
Well, I'll choose my words carefully here. The California Democrat has been less than democratic with a small d. And so I should say the National Party, the DNC. California has this strange rule, the CDP, California Democratic Party, which says when an incumbent runs for re-election, that incumbent is going to be automatically endorsed by the state party unless they're filed with 20% of the delegates in that district opposing the automatic endorsement. I'm in litigation right now with the California Democratic Party because in my opinion, and I think the facts can prove that they screwed around. I turned in a petition which had enough signatures. Then after the time was finished, they changed the number of signatures they said were required and said, oh, by the way, you didn't get enough. We didn't tell you that you needed more. So that will be decided later by a court. So I'm fighting this.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're in that with Maria, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if Maria's case is still going, but mine sure as hell is, and I'm not going to drop it until there's a reason to do it. Yes, I am fighting very hard against a state party which is supposed to be neutral and is nothing, couldn't be further from being neutral. The state party endorses incumbents automatically. That's got to go. That's got to go, along with super delegates and some other issues.
Absolutely. What do you want to look towards as far as voting? Do you support ranked choice? Do you want all paper ballots? Do you want open primaries? What are ideally, I know California has some of those, but what would you also like to see across the country in the hopefully near future?
I think the biggest thing that is needed is called open source software. Right now, votes in many places, including some in California and across the country, particularly in Ohio, which has been a huge battleground, are counted by for-profit companies, which, believe it or not, in some cases, actually count the votes somewhere outside the United States. That's got to stop. Open source software will reduce that. And these companies are owned in many cases by like Diebold. I forget, but they have a new name now, but it's the same old company. And they're unquestionably Republican supporters. So if anybody wants to screw around with voting results, they're in a position to do it without being detected. Open source software will stop that. Obviously, paper ballots are a big deal. On the ranked choice voting, I'm kind of ambivalent about that, to be honest, because one, it's very difficult to understand. A lot of people do not understand it. And secondly, I'm not sure that a state can impose ranked choice voting in a federal election. That's a legal issue which is yet to be addressed. That's why my election and the U.S. Senate election here this year is not ranked choice, because it is a federal election, whereas the other offices are ranked choice. Statewide and local offices are ranked choice. So.
Right. And I just as a side note, please get your volunteers to be at the polling stations Tuesday, just to kind of observe, just precautionary. I definitely suggest that, just because we don't.
San Francisco has a very vigorous anti-fraud system set up. It's all paper, and that's because we're so small and so condensed geographically. Nobody can dump a box of ballots, which was found in the Bay, empty ballots. But around the counties in San Francisco, which many of them are very large, and where they have to, the paper ballots have to be physically carried into a central county location. You're absolutely right about that. There has to be very good vigilance on that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't need another like Shillery situation.
No.
At all. You also, the thing that I love about your platform is, besides Bernie, you're the only person I've ever seen have animal rights on their their platform.
Well,
I don't know why. It's very important.
It's very important to me, because a person who doesn't believe that there are sentient beings on the earth other than us humans, beings that feel pain, joy, happiness, who mourn for their lost ones, that says something about the person themselves. And my wife and I, we're kind of crazy. We have 4 parrots and a dog, and we're very strong animal rights people. But I think that comes from our own personal feelings of morality about and empathy and compassion for life itself. And so, yes, I feel very strongly about animal rights, and I do think animals should be given certainly the right not to be put to death just because their owner wants to. I think that's another kind of murder. That's
Absolutely.
another kind of murder.
Yeah, I bother Stephen with bird memes and gifs all the time. I can't help it. They're so cute. And then they remind me of your birds.
Yes.
One of the things that you have on your platform that every single person from California I've interviewed talks about is homelessness. Is your district very prevalent with homelessness and housing?
I think our district, if it's not the national capital of homelessness, it's right up there. San Francisco has this reputation for its acceptance and compassion, but the other side of that coin is that it attracts lots of people who think they have nowhere else to go, and it's a very, very complicated issue. To use the new word, it intersects with economic issues, mental illness issues, policing issues. It's a combination of all of these issues, and the solution is very complicated. It has to be done in a humane manner, but on the other hand, we can't just stick our head in the sand and say there's nothing we can do. From a federal point of view, and that's my campaign is a federal one, and homelessness is not completely local, but it's mostly a local issue. From a federal point of view, the two things that have occurred to me that I would look into are, one, getting in touch with the Surgeon General and see if there could be actually a health crisis declared, because the homelessness are causing an epidemic of disease here in San Francisco, and that is a genuine health crisis. And if the federal government has the power to intervene and try and stop it, I think it ought to do so, if the city won't. Same thing with the CDC, Center for Disease Control. They could declare an epidemic of some kind, an epidemic of disease or thing, and move them in there. So I do think there are some federal solutions. Nobody talks about them except me, and I will look into that when I'm elected for Congress as well.
Awesome. I unfortunately we're at a half an hour, and I know you're so busy. Yeah. I could talk to you for hours because I just adore you. You know that. And guys, you know, this might not matter to you, but it matters to me. And he's a damn good hugger. And I think that says a lot. I'm big on hugs. So that sold me right away. But so, you know, as far as Tuesday, you guys, I cannot ask you enough. Please vote for Stephen and for Gail. Those two in California, they can change California and they can set a precedent for our country. So we're counting on Californians to get out and vote Tuesday. We're all looking at you. I'm in Pennsylvania and I'm following those races. So please get out there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you,
yes,
Stephen.
And I would, you know, if anybody is listening or hearing this or hears it later, if you are in San Francisco or if you know anybody in San Francisco, please get the word out, because name recognition is a big deal. I'm all over the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know, anywhere you want to look, you'll find my stuff. And a few votes could really matter in this one. So I ask people, if they can, to get out our message. It's the right thing to do, and it's going to become a part of history, I think.
Absolutely. I decided what I'm going to do is, you know how I did the event today and I invited you and a bunch of people? I'm going to do that about voting on Tuesday. So I'm going to set up an event and invite all my friends from California. That way they'll have a reminder to get off their ass and go to the polls. So
thank you, Joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. I wish you the best of luck. I really do. You're an amazing person.
Thank you, and we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, guys.
Right.
Oh, I have 2 more shows tonight, by the way, 8 and 9, Greens in California. Thank you, guys. Good luck, Stephen. Take care.